Susan, just walk us briefly through the history of Pottermore.
Sure. Pottermore is J.K. Rowling's digital content company. For those of you that may not know it, it launched in 2012 to consumers in two parts. The first was as a expression of an online reading experience centered around the 7 books. And it also was a direct-to-consumer e-commerce site where it was the exclusive seller of the books in digital form. I started in October of 2013, and one of the things that we worked over the past few years was to reposition it to really broaden beyond the 7 books and to make sure that it was also a digital publisher as well as a direct-to-consumer seller. So for the past year plus, we've been selling our books through Apple, Amazon, other places versus going it alone. And we've also been broadening the content publishing that we've been doing to be all about our new properties, Cursed Child and Fantastic Beasts.
Fantastic Beasts just passed $600 million in the global box office,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
What was Pottermore's role in the marketing of the movie?
So we work really closely with Warner Brothers, but our job at Pottermore was not really just to market the film. Obviously, that's what Warner's does and does it really well. Our job was actually to create a lot of backstory around the characters and link them to the wider wizarding world and to Harry Potter. Has anybody seen the movie? A few of you. Okay. The movie actually features 4 characters that you may not know. And so we needed to provide a lot of backstory on these characters and help create a linkage in the worlds between Harry Potter and a movie that was set 70 years before Harry Potter went to Hogwarts. We did that really through 2 different ways. We worked with J.K. Rowling, who wrote new content about the wizarding world and about Fantastic Beasts in New York City. We launched that online with Warner Brothers and global media partners, one of which was Entertainment Weekly. So thanks for your support in that. And throughout the year when we launched that content, we also took lots of different pieces of the footage that we were working with Warner Brothers to shoot in Leavesden in London and put little bits of that online. So we had journalists actually covering the taping and the making of the film, and we worked with the characters to actually create different parts of their world that was tied to Harry Potter.
Got it. So this year, in addition, the 6-hour play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child opened to great reviews and
6 hours, yes.
Sold out performances. I think you can't get a ticket for like 2 years or something like that. What was Pottermore's role with that?
Well, very similar to Fantastic Beasts, we have done a lot of lead up into Cursed Child. Cursed Child is a little different. It's the 8th Harry Potter story. It's set 19 years after Harry Potter, so we have both a prequel and a sequel, sort of with Harry Potter in the middle. And we had a lot of coverage, not only of the play and the storyline as it was unfolding, but we broke a lot of news. You may have seen just last week, we broke that Cursed Child will be coming to New York to the Lyric Theater, hopefully 2018. So you don't have to wait a few years for a ticket. But we've been working with the theater creators and the talent to also be celebrating different aspects of the play that you may or may not know about. It's a very interesting and deep wizarding world that J.K. Rowling's created. So we need to be finding ways to give it different dimension to that for the audience and the consumer.
Right, and is it tricky tying something that takes place so many years after the books with the play to like the movie, which is 70 years before?
It is, because ultimately there's a canon that J.K. Rowling's created and that she's really the arbiter of, and we have to find ways to be true to that canon. For both Fantastic Beasts and for Cursed Child, simultaneous with the content launching, we published the digital version of those books. And that was also really different. For Cursed Child being the 8th story, we published a script book that people aren't really used to reading plays, so that felt really different for the majority of people. Also for Fantastic Beasts, Warner Brothers took the screenplay that J.K. Rowling made, and that's the movie. So J.K. Rowling basically became a filmmaker. They didn't option a book. It wasn't based on any book. It was loosely tied to a textbook that Harry Potter used at Hogwarts. So we've had to find ways to make that whole world make sense, and we've basically broadened it beyond just those special years at Hogwarts.
Right. So the closest franchise I can think of to Harry Potter is Star Wars. And I'm fascinated by the fact that when Kathleen Kennedy took over at Lucasfilm, Star Wars had been diluted, so to speak, in many different ways. There were comic books, there were novels, so on and so forth. And she basically, and this was gutsy, she drew a big line and she was like, this is canon and this isn't. And, you know, going forward, everything will be canon. But Pottermore has been canon from the very beginning.
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So what are the challenges of that and what are the advantages?
So it is different having a real live creator who is largely in control of the world that she's created. And we spend a lot of time collaboratively working across Warner Brothers and also with Joe to make sure that everything we're all putting out makes sense. I think it's one of the reasons why when we put out the content for Fantastic Beasts in 3 different content drops this past year, it was content that Joe wrote. It wasn't marketing content. It also means that we have to be really careful what we put out because we are J.K. Rowling's company, and our fans, as many of you know, and you've got 2 daughters, right, who are big fans?
Yes.
Everything we do can be scrutinized and looked at and fact-checked for accuracy. So we spend a lot of time actually on Joe's Twitter feed and going through it, and she'll reveal little bits and pieces, and we have to make sure that those bits and pieces are not only accurate, it's her world, of course they're accurate, but that we're tying in and supporting them in a way that actually broadens the canon.
Right, so you can't be an idea machine in advance. You have to wait until she's written something, and then you take what she's written and you mine that, right?
We do mine that, and she writes a lot of work that you may know reputationally sometimes doesn't even make it into the books or into the film. She's a prolific writer, and part of, I think, her process is generating characters and their backstory through a lot of stuff that may get published over time. So there's lots of content that we're working with right now that we haven't put live. She doesn't write it and give it to us and we instantly publish. Although we are doing daily content publishing, some of it's her work and some of it's content that we're producing, there are things that we get inspired by and things that we work on collaboratively together. One of the best examples of that we worked on together with Joe was the idea that you could be sorted both into a Hogwarts house and an Ilvermorny house. Hogwarts is the British wizarding school, and Ilvermorny is the American wizarding school. And when we talked with Joe about it, we said, can we actually have a concept that you could be, I don't know, a transfer student? If you were in the UK and then you transferred to the US? And she said, well, actually, I think you probably could be sorted into both of those houses. They have different sorting ceremonies, and she worked collaboratively with us to write that. So we pitch each other ideas, and she comes up with a lot of stuff, and we do mine that.
Right, and I think we have a video to show of the Patronus experience, which is one of the digital experiences.
And should we actually explain to everyone what that is in case they don't know?
Yes, go ahead.
And I hope some of you will find out what your Patronus is. It's one part of your wizarding identity. It's actually a very difficult charm in a defensive way to produce with your wand. And when you produce it, it actually protects you from evil spirits that in the wizarding world are called dementors that could suck the life out of you and just make everything awful. So one of the ways, and we're talking a little bit about how we stitch these worlds together, we took the cast of Fantastic Beasts, the 4 protagonists, and we had them take a very short series of online prompts, which is this quiz that J.K. Rowling had written. We expanded on her quiz, which was the authentic canon, and we created a 3D environment with an audio soundscape, and we put it online, and we had people take a look at what their Patronus would be, should they be able to cast it through their wand. 3 million people took it in the first 3 days, but let's take a look at what Eddie Redmayne's Patronus is.
Hey there, I'm Eddie Redmayne, and I'm about to discover my Patronus on the brilliant Pottermore.com. All right, so let's get started. Oh, that's beautiful. Sun, wind, or rain, sun. Even though I'm friendly. Sweet or salt, sweet. Popcorn, always. I'm going to meet it. Come on, big moment. Here we go. Oh my God, I'm a basset hound. I'm a basset hound. That is ingenious. I love basset hounds. Floppy ears and kind of kind mentality. Slightly dopey. Perfect. My Patronus is a basset hound. That's wonderful. I hope you enjoy finding your Patronus on Pottermore.com.
That was a fun piece when we worked on that with him. First of all, completely unscripted. When you take that experience or that quiz, you don't know what your Patronus is going to be. It's only between 5 to 7 questions. And you take it once, and you can't really retake it. And it's an interesting thing that we had worked on with J.K. Rowling and talking a little bit about how she writes content, and we mine that content and publicize and launch that content. she had written that, I think, before I even got to Pottermore. And so when I started in October of 2013, it was about 6 months later that I knew we had this content available to us. And we wanted to make it using really cutting edge technology. It was sort of difficult to do what we did in sort of a 3JS technical architecture. And ultimately, when we developed that, it took us a little while to do it. And Jo had come out on Twitter in the fall of 2014 or so and said, okay, everybody, my Patronus is a pine marten. And she came out, and we were working on the quiz at that point, but we hadn't yet had her actually take the test. So we were talking a little bit with her about 6 months ago to say, okay, we're ready to demo this for you. It's in beta, but we just want to make sure that if you take it, you may actually get a different result. You may not be a pine marten. And she'd been very prolific, telling people she was a pine marten. She loves pine martens. She'd been posting pictures of them. And we wanted to make sure that she would be okay with potentially getting a different result. And what was amazing with us was that she took it. None of us were there with her. She took it. She got a completely different result. She's a heron, I believe. And she wound up tweeting about it, which we didn't know because she controls her own Twitter feed. And we were delighted that that worked out because it was part of the fiction that apparently your Patronus can actually change through some series of life events. So we learn a little bit in this job too.
Mm-hmm. So you reach your core fan base in a number of ways. And obviously on Pottermore, there's a fair amount of fresh content written by Jo herself. But you also employ a team of Pottermore correspondents who are doing actual news reporting. And you have become the place that Potter fans go for news. And you are a news site. That's different, right?
We are a news site, and it is different. It was one of the things we saw in the market that was a little bit of a void, was an authentic, true source about what is really happening in the wizarding world. I think when Pottermore first started, Twitter wasn't actually the medium that it is today. And for J.K. Rowling being a writer and enjoying expressing herself in 140 characters or less and on her own terms, she's become to use that as a real tool. And we wanted to publish to engage the audience with content on a much more frequent basis, but we didn't want to solely rely on content from J.K. Rowling. So we created a concept that we call the Pottermore correspondents. They're professional journalists. We don't byline them. We don't release their identity. They're in different parts of the world, and they report on different things that are happening. And they themselves, part of their criteria is that they're big Potter fans. So our really core audience was between 9 and 12 in the late 90s when the first book was published, and grew up with the fiction and believed that that rite of passage of Daniel Radcliffe and all the characters from the movie or Harry Potter from the books was really what they also grew up with. So those people, that audience is now late 20s. They're on our site in droves. Many of them are our Pottermore correspondents. Some of them work with us in London and for us. And we find that there's an awful lot of stuff going on within the entire world that sometimes we don't even know is happening, and it's getting reported in from different locales and different environments.
And so this is how you deal with the problem of fans just being insatiable for more content all the time, right?
Fans are insatiable, and I think that's probably what we're going to hear in the next panel from Star Wars too. You know, there's a feed the beast mentality with these properties, and in our case at Pottermore, because J.K. Rowling is living, breathing, delightful, amazing creator in charge of this world, we're not dreaming up new characters or ways to expose different storylines. Part of our role is to actually create different themes and different comparison points now that more fun to do given how broad the wizarding world has become, but to find different, essentially things to report on. And I think in a way that when fans reach out to Jo on Twitter or they want her to validate something, we saw this a lot on Patronus. People would say, well, I'm a salmon, is that good or not good? And she would weigh in and she would tell her thoughts on it. It's also finding part of a way to legitimize and authenticate not only what we're publishing, but take a little bit of the burden off of her to have to do that work.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about Pottermore shorts and what they are, and whether there will be more of them.
So as part of our role as a digital publisher, earlier this year, we published a series of ebook shorts called Pottermore Presents. They're $1.99 or $2.99, depending on the currency that we're in, which these days might all be the same. And we found a need in the market for an hour-long read that could also take content we had curated on Pottermore over the years, Jo's writing, but also content that we had stitched together. And we thematically linked them, and we launched them in September in a Back to Hogwarts theme. If you're a fan, what you'll know is September 1st is the day that everyone goes back to Hogwarts. And so we took that content and published it in really just bite-sized reads. They've done extremely well. We've been selling them as a trio, but they're individual purchasing. And what's been fun for us is that in the 2 weekends during the year, both the UK and the US had different daylight savings times. And so we had a concept calling Make Your Hour Magical, because we were able to actually turn that extra hour into reading time.
That's great. I think we're actually out of time here.
I do, but it's been delightful to see you.
Thank you so
thanks for the
much.
chat.